Great to see everyone. I'm just going to give it a minute or two while people join us. We've got a really nice group. Hey, Mark. Hope you're healing okay. You look great. You're muted though. I can't hear you.
I've been feeling better the last 3 days. Thank you.
Good. I'm glad you turned the corner.
Where are we?
Well, we're approaching the corner. I'm tapping the brake.
Okay. You'll get there. Look at Valerie and Brad. Hey guys. Good to see you. Glad you two are still talking to each other and sitting close together. Yeah. That's a good sign.
It's all right.
I thought Brad would be out in that ADU in the backyard by now.
No, I've actually learned about all the things I've done wrong for the last 30 years.
Oh, well, you must be living at my house.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see. I want to say hi to everybody. Carly, good to see you. Hey, Merle, hey. Arizona. Hi, Claudia from Topanga, I'm guessing. Not Bologna.
No, fortunately not. They won't let me in.
Yeah, they won't let any of us in.
We're stuck at here. We're stuck at wherever we are.
Yeah, I was supposed to be in Capri right now. Yeah, who cares?
We can hear you.
Who cares? I can get John and Vinny pizza, so who cares? Anyway, Risa, good to see you. Hi, Joy, Robert, Carol. Hey, Gay, I see your ceiling, but I don't see you. There we go. Hey, Barry, Deborah's with us. Always good to have a psychologist on the call. Susan, Roy, George, Maxine. Hey, guys. Scott, good to see you.
He did. He called you Robert.
Well, no, there's not you, Bob. Robert. There's a difference. You're Robert and you're Bob and he's Robert. There we go. Hey, Catherine.
I'm here.
I know you are. Good news too. You look great.
Thank you.
You look a lot better than Bob. I'll tell you that.
Wow.
Hi, Rabbi.
It's a low bar. Hi, Mary.
Hi.
Hi, Nadine. Hi, Barry. I'm going to see who I can say hi to. Every Harold, Nancy, Ian. I see you guys.
We're all set with the guy.
Wow,
55
people.
Yeah, we've got we'll have like 60, 70, 100 people. I don't know. Scott Carter, thanks for joining us. We're pitching that podcast next week, Scott. Wish me luck. Let's see. I'm gonna switch to Sukasa. I see you. David, good to see you. Oh, this is so nice. Hi, Dana. Everybody's here. Marlene. I'm only saying hi to you if you're brave enough to be live and put your picture up. Otherwise, it doesn't count. Hi,
can't get it up.
Hi, Jana. Hi, Joni.
Hi.
Oh, we got so many people here. It's great. Stan. Ellen and Mark. See, we got another rabbi on here. Lynn's with us.
We heard you were doing a tribute to Carl Reiner.
You heard what?
We heard you were doing a tribute to Carl Reiner. That's why we're here.
Oh,
just
you know
kidding.
what? I'll tell you something. Even at his age,
Honey, please.
Betsy would have left me in a nanosecond for Carl Reiner.
Had a line to it. I can't get it.
Betsy loved him, and she would see him sometimes at Whole Foods.
No,
Wow.
no, there.
Yeah.
No, I'm there, aren't I?
Yeah, I think
Okay.
Mel Brooks would have dinner every night.
Yep. It's really sad. Oh, good. I see Ken and Julie are with us.
We're done.
So, okay. I think it's kind of slowed down now, the number coming in. So we've got about 60 with us here, and I don't know how many on Facebook. So we're a nice group today. And I want to welcome everyone and thank you for being with me to study. Actually, we have a double portion, 2 different portions today combined into one. And of course, I always accept that as a challenge to try and figure out how to tie the two together in some meaningful way so that it's more than just random, that they ended up being that we have them together on this weekend. Just to sort of explain that quickly for a minute, and some of you already know this, there are 54 sections of the Torah, and obviously only 52 weeks in the year. And then you also have certain holidays where the regular flow or chronology of Torah readings is interrupted, and you do a special reading for that holiday instead. So what that means is there are a handful of weeks during every year when we have to double up Torah portions in order to make sure we get through all 54 in that year. And this is one of those weeks. So we have a double Torah portion. And I always kind of accept that as a challenge to figure out what the two, if anything, have to do with each other. And this, you'll decide at the end if I resolved it successfully or not. Okay. And I'm going to issue an opportunity. There's an opportunity for all of us coming up, because here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to first of all admit something to all of you, which is I usually don't write my Shabbat messages that go out to the congregation around 5 or 6 o'clock every afternoon. I usually don't write them until 2 or 3 o'clock on Friday afternoon. And that's partly because I procrastinate, partly because it's hard to come up with the right idea, and partly because Fridays and Thursdays usually are super busy days. But in any case, I haven't written it yet. And today I'm going to be presenting 3 kind of major different themes in these 2 Torah portions. And then we're going to have a vote, okay? And you guys will decide which of the 3 I will write my Shabbat message about and have it out to you by 5 or 6 o'clock this afternoon. Okay, everybody got that? So it's the people's choice today. Your command, you command the theme. I will fulfill it with a column by 5 or 6 o'clock. Okay. So let's make sure everyone's muted just for this one. Everyone mute. And then if you have a question, you can just raise your hand or go into the chat room. I'll pause and open it up for questions and comments. And then Don Levy, who's with me for the class today, Don will unmute you, or you can, and then we'll hear what everyone has to say. So we'll try and control it in that way. Okay. Before we do anything else, we recite the blessing for the study of Torah. And most of you know it, some of you may not. It starts the way all blessings start, but it ends with the words La Asok B'divrei Torah. La Asok B'divrei Torah, which means to busy ourselves with Torah. So if you know it, please join me. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la asok b'divrei Torah. Means blessed are you, Adonai, our God, who commands us to busy ourselves with Torah. Now, those of you who might have a Bible at home, or a Chumash, or a Tanakh, we are going to begin at the beginning of the first of these 2 Torah portions, which is called Chukat, and it's the book of Numbers, chapter 19. Okay, so I'll give you just a second to find that. By the way, most of you probably are sitting with a phone. You can just Google Numbers 19 and you'll have it on your phone too. You don't need to have a Bible with you. Just pull it up on your phone because I think it might be helpful. So take a second to do that. We really have a great group today. I'm really grateful to all of you for joining in today. Okay. All right, so I'm going to assume everybody's sort of caught up. So here we begin this first Torah portion, Chukat, okay, which means decree, essentially, in English. A chok is a law. Chukat would be a decree.
You've gone off.
And it's, okay, everybody mute. Make sure you're muted.
Doesn't work.
There we go. All right. Now, we're gonna start with what is unquestionably one of the strangest little vignettes in the entire Torah. And it's known as the case of the red heifer or the red cow. So let me just read the English and a few verses of the English, and then we're going to talk about it. So here we go. This is the ritual law that the Lord has commanded. Instruct the Israelite people to bring you a red cow without blemish, in which there is no defect, and on which no yoke has been laid. And you shall give it to Eleazar the priest, and it'll be taken outside the camp and slaughtered in his presence. And let me just give you the more complete picture of this. So this is an extremely, extremely rare occurrence. A perfect red cow, entirely red, completely unblemished, in perfect condition, and has never been used for any to pull a plow. Some of the rabbis say there were fewer than 30 ever born in the history of Israel. Okay, and there are ultra right-wing Jews in Israel today trying to figure out how to breed a perfect red cow for when the Messiah comes and the priesthood is reestablished. So this is a pretty rare thing. This is perfection on earth. I'm saying that very deliberately. So we have this example of perfection on earth, and as soon as we see it, we take it outside the camp and slaughter it. And then later, its ashes are used to mix with water to purify someone who has become ritually or spiritually unclean. Okay? All right. Before I opine and give you at least what I think this is really all about, I'm going to open it up and just, we're going to play this game. What is the sermon? What is behind this very strange ritual that this perfect creature comes into the world and then it is immediately turned into ash, and those ashes later are used to help someone become spiritually clean? Okay? So I'm going to let Don Levy look for hands, and I'll look for hands. If anybody has a thought they want to share, we're going to unmute you and hear what you have to say. And this is really hard. This is not a simple thing. Rabbis have really pondered this. Susan, go ahead. Susan Ehrlich. Yeah, we're not hearing you for some reason. Don Levy, can you help Susan?
Okay, yeah,
There we go.
Unmuted.
Okay,
Unmuted.
go ahead, Susan.
Well, you had said this before, that perfection doesn't exist in this world. And I really remember that, because there's so many things that are imperfect. And you show that it doesn't belong in the world by killing it. That's not real life. But in
other words, what we're saying, I would say it slightly differently, and I may be correcting myself from the last time we talked about this, but I wouldn't say that it doesn't exist, because clearly this calf was born.
Mm-hmm.
But I would say it shouldn't exist.
Okay.
It should not be the ideal. Perfection is not the ideal. And we're going to get in, I think, in a very deep and spiritual way today about why it is not the ideal. But anything else, Susan? I think you're on the right track for sure.
But in terms of, I'm still confused about how its ashes can be used to healing. Could it be that that's a reminder of the ultimate perfection, which is unattainable or is rare, and that people should not have to aspire? It cleanses them of aspirations to be perfect and to have the world perfect.
Well,
I improve the world, but perfection won't happen. You can improve
it's okay. I like it. Let's keep going. I'm gonna resist the temptation to jump in. I think that Gary Cohn was next, and then Mark, and then Valerie, and then we'll kind of sum it up. Gary?
I'm going to back off, and her comment was where I was headed.
Okay. All right. Wow. Gentlemanly of you. Thank you. Okay, Mark, and then Valerie. Go ahead, Mark.
Perfection may be aspirational. It should be aspirational. It should be a continuing journey, perhaps. And that if perfection is obtained in a flower or a heifer, that it has to be extinguished because the rest of us have to keep striving for perfection.
So I would just want to push back on one thing you said, which is perfection should be our aspiration. We should aspire to perfection. Will you stand by that?
Well, perfection is a funny word, and I think the concept is that, you know, whether it's living a good life or being a good man or a good woman or a good father or whatever, but that for something to be achieved, to be a perfection, sort of chills maybe the goals for the rest of us to keep improving oneself. Not, I mean, look, I don't want to be perfect, and certainly Lynn would say I'm not perfect, but there still should be that striving, that journey to self-improve.
Yeah, which is different than perfection. Aspiring to be better is different than aspiring to be perfect.
Well, that's why I said it's a journey.
Right. Okay. Valerie?
Oh,
Or Brad, sorry. Go ahead.
well, first of all, perfection isn't all that it's cracked up to be. That's not, it's just, it gets in the way actually moving forward. And I think in the creation story, don't they talk about everything's good? It's not perfect.
Correct.
You know, good enough for God, it's good enough for me.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyone else? Let's see. Sukasa, go ahead.
It seems strange to me that you have to take the ashes from a perfect heifer for somebody to no longer be unclean. That doesn't seem to be, so what you're saying is the person who's unclean, or what the Torah is saying is the person who's unclean has to be perfect too. And that doesn't sound right.
Okay, I see Merle's hand. So Merle, go ahead. This is so good. Everyone's in on this. I'm going to come back to your point in a moment, Sukasa, and give you, I think, a different way of thinking about it. Okay. You know, what is the counterbalancing effect of these ashes of perfection on a person who is spiritually out of sorts and unclean for some reason? In this case, it's unclean because of handling a corpse, right? So, someone else I just saw, Merle, you had your hand up. Go ahead.
So I'm guessing here, but that it take the red heifer is very rare, so that makes it special. That you need something really special to help you become pure. Something special to guide you to become pure.
A model.
Right. And that whatever that special thing is will help you achieve higher goals for yourself. Not perfection, but higher goals.
Okay. I think Barbara Cosberg, did you have your hand up? You have to unmute before you talk. Don Levy, can you unmute Marty Cosberg?
You also, there are two questions in chat.
Yeah, I see that Gay and Dana both have their hands up. So go ahead. But let's go to Barbara and then Gay and Dana. Go ahead, Barbara. Okay, you're still muted, Barbara. So work on unmuting, and I'm going to go to Gay class next. Gay, go ahead, and then we'll come back to you, Barbara. Go ahead, Gay.
So I just think a better goal. A lot of people have hurt themselves badly striving for perfection. I think a better goal is excellence. But somehow I think maybe the ashes on this person who needs cleansing that they become cleansed because within themselves they realize that they don't have to be, they become more okay with themselves because they see that there really isn't any such thing as perfection.
This is what I was going to say to Sukasa. I think that another way to look at it is these ashes mixed with water are a message, a potion that essentially says to the afflicted person, no one's perfect. Nothing is perfect. Emerson said there is a crack in everything that God has made. By the way, Leonard Cohen didn't riffed off of that idea, but it wasn't his idea. Emerson said there is a crack in everything that God has made. And then Leonard Cohen, in his song Ring the Bells, said there's a crack in everything and that's how the light gets in, which is a very deep spiritual concept that the imperfection is what actually leads to a more perfect being. And that imperfection is the root of growth toward betterment, right? Now let's go, Barbara, you're unmuted, so go ahead.
Well, my famous saying was, perfection is imperfection in itself. And I don't see how ashes can purify a person. They need to purify themselves. It has to be within a person. Maybe this gives inspiration, but I think it's kind of like a false idol. A heifer's like a false idol. Another thing is, if we are all imperfect and we're in God's image, then God is not perfect.
Yeah, well, I would agree with that. I don't think God is perfect. Look at the world.
That's my point.
Okay, Dana, and then I want to wrap it up with my thoughts, and we're going to move to the second of the three major themes. The first is, what is this thing, perfection, and is it a positive and negative, and how do we manage it? But Dana, go ahead.
Hi, everyone. My idea was the same as Gay, so I'll pass my turn.
Okay. All right. So
I have something different.
Yes. Yeah, go ahead, Lori.
My thought is that it's a metaphor, that it's really not talking about physical perfection. In the Bible that I'm looking at, it says a heifer without spot and upon which never came a yoke. So I'm thinking that perhaps the yoke is corruption, and that it's not so much a reference to physical perfection, but that the idea of having someone being pure in thought and deed and metaphor.
What Tanakh are you using, by the way?
Oh, I don't know. It's a very pretty thing that I bought many years ago.
Oh, I know. I see it. I know what that's got the silver cover on it, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So look, the way I understand this is that perfection is not the ideal. And I think that that's a soothing and comforting message to a person who is spiritually unclean and needs to be cleansed. In other words, it's the same reason that I think therapists have to remain non-judgmental and not tell you you're a bad person because you have these character flaws. Any therapist that did that, I think, would not be therapeutic in nature. And I'm not saying that there isn't a difference between right and wrong, but flaws in this context, or the person who is spiritually unclean, is approached, I think, with this potion. And yes, Barbara, it is a symbolic cleansing. The real cleansing has to come from within. But we do those things all the time. We symbolically, have ways of telling people you're okay. And nothing and no one is perfect, and we understand, and there's a way back in for you. So that's how I see the use of these ashes. And in any case, I think the most basic thing we can say with pretty broad agreement across all the comments that we've heard is that perfection is not the ideal. And Brad rightly points out, in the story of creation, which is the foundational story of what existence is about, everything material is called good or very good. Nothing is called perfect. Absolutely nothing. And I want to say a word now about the one additional idea for you about the perfection of imperfection. And that has to do with being what's broken, when something is broken. So there's this very beautiful story in the Talmud about a phrase in Deuteronomy that says God puts words upon our hearts. Al in Hebrew, upon our hearts. And the sages ask, why does God put words upon our hearts? Why doesn't God put words in our hearts? Certainly, God, if God has the power to place words upon our hearts, God has the power to place words within our hearts. And the answer the sages give is that God places words upon our hearts, but it isn't until our hearts are broken that the words can enter. That there's some deeper level of empathy. There is some deeper level of understanding, of wisdom, of spirituality, of meaning, and of purpose that comes from the imperfection, from the brokenness, which therefore means, both paradoxically and brilliantly and beautifully, that in some ways we are actually more whole when we are broken. And I think that's the deepest concept at work here. That we are more whole when broken. Some of you, by the way, might know that children's story by Shel Silverstein, The Missing Piece. You guys know that story?
Yes.
So very quickly, it's a story about a wheel that's missing a piece. A wedge is missing. And so it kind of limps along because it's missing this wedge, and it doesn't move very well or very quickly. But as it limps along, you know, it smells the flowers and talks to the animals and sees the birds, but it's always looking for its missing piece, and it just keeps limping through the world looking for its missing piece. And then one day it finds its missing piece, finds a perfectly sized wedge, and puts it in, and the circle is whole again, and it starts rolling through its life very, very quickly. And it misses everything. And so what does the circle do? It stops, removes the piece, and goes back to its previous shape, limping imperfectly through the world, because it's a better life. It's a more meaningful and purposeful life. That's a children's story, but actually I think it's quite deep, and it's a children's story about this idea that in a way we're more whole when we're broken.
Does that relate to our isolation now, to the COVID?
I'll tell you something. I think that's the dirty little secret of this isolation, is that in many ways, I'll speak only for myself, okay? And I am not dismissing the terrible suffering that it is causing, death and suffering. However, here's the dark little dirty secret, which I will tell you about my life, and maybe it applies to yours, okay? My life, in many ways, is much better now than it was before. Much better. Because my life before, now looking at it from this perspective, was utterly insane. Insane. The pace was utterly insane, and I did it for 33 years. And so, yes, the answer, Susan, I think is yes, right? The race is not to the swift, says the book of Ecclesiastes. The race is not to the swift. There's a lot to be said for a limp. Let me put it that way, to go back to Shel Silverstein. So I don't want to spend too much more time on this, because we've given it about 5 or 10 minutes more than we should if we're going to go a third. So, but yes, that's the dirty little secret of Steve Leder's life during the pandemic. His life is better. You know, there's not much I miss all that much, except all of you, of course. But I get to see you like this. Okay, well, let's move on. All right. Now we're gonna jump ahead, and I'm gonna jump ahead now this is a very brief story, this red heifer story. And then, it's like 6 or 7 verses. And now I want to go to verse 8, chapter 19, verse 8. And this is a very famous story that you all already know. This is the story of the Israelites complaining that there's not enough water for them in the desert. And what Moses says to God and what God says to Moses and what happens, okay? And we're going to drill down very deeply into this too, okay? So let's keep in mind that we've dealt now with a certain duality, the idea of wholeness within brokenness. Okay, that's the first duality. We're going to deal with another duality here. Each one of these themes today deals with the duality of the human existence. So Moses, the people are complaining. We want to go back. It's horrible here in the desert. It was better being slaves. There's no water to drink. And Moses and Aaron fall on their faces. They're just distraught they can't take the complaining any longer. And here's what God says, verse 8, you and your brother Aaron take the rod, Moses' rod, and assemble the community, and before their very eyes, order the rock, pay attention to the words here, order the rock to yield its water. Thus you shall produce water for them from the rock and provide drink for the congregation and their beasts, okay? So Moses and Aaron are told to speak to the rock and water will flow. Moses took the rod from before the Lord as he had commanded him, so he got the first thing right. Moses and Aaron assembled the congregation in front of the rock, got the second thing right. And now listen to what he says. Moses says, listen, you rebels, shall we get water for you out of this rock? And Moses raised his hand and struck the rock twice with his rod, and out came copious water, and the community and their beasts drank. Okay? God told him to speak to the rock. He says to the people, where are we, my brother and I, supposed to get water for you? And then he strikes the rock twice. And the Lord gets angry. God gets angry with Moses and Aaron, and he says to Moses, because you did not trust me enough to affirm my sanctity in the sight of the Israelite people, you shall not lead this congregation into the land that I have given him. This is the moment that Moses finds out he is not going to make it to the promised land, which is a very, very harsh punishment for a guy who has taken on for 40 years the responsibility of leading these people through the desert and who was reluctant in the first place to do so. Now, what is his sin? What did Moses do that was so terrible? I mean, he got the water. What did he do that was so terrible that he's not allowed in to the promised land? Nadine, I saw you raised your hand, so let's unmute and I'd like to hear from you. Maybe Don Levy, can you unmute Nadine Alexander, please? Or maybe I can. I can unmute you. Oh, maybe, no, I can't.
Okay.
I don't know. Go ahead.
He struck the rock rather than talking to it, and therefore.
Okay, and that's what most people say. That's what most people say, okay? That it's because, this, by the way, is a lesson we teach children in nursery school all the time about Moses. He didn't use his words, he used his fists, right? He struck the rock instead of speaking to the rock. That is what 99% of people think the sin is that kept Moses out of the promised land. And in my opinion, they're wrong. There's a different reason. Does anyone else have a different idea?
I do.
Who's up there? Susan, go ahead.
Yes, that the we business.
The we business, exactly. Tell us.
Implying that it wasn't God's miracle, but it was Moses and Aaron's accomplishment.
Right.
And we know that, God is a jealous God and he wants credit for what he is doing. So So I think that was it, the
Yeah.
lack of humility there.
It's the sin of arrogance. It is the sin of hubris, which, by the way, is the ultimate, well, I shouldn't say the ultimate, a very serious transgression in Jewish thought. Arrogance is often punished. And I would urge us all to think about the greatest mistakes we've ever made in our lives. And I'd be willing to bet a very large percentage of them were the result of arrogance, a lack of humility. And now we kind of go into this duality again. Moses has to lead these people, which requires a certain degree of arrogance, narcissism even. I mean, think about what it takes internally to believe you should lead people. But it also, in order to be an effective leader, requires humility. And this is why Moses isn't allowed into the promised land, because he lost his humility. Where are we? How am I supposed to get water for you? It's not him, it's God. And I'll tell you, some of you know this when we studied Passover together. This is carried to such a high degree with Moses that some of you know in the Haggadah that we read at our Passover Seder, Moses' name is not mentioned. He was written out of the Passover story by the rabbis. He doesn't exist in the Haggadah. You could argue the main character of the story doesn't exist in the Haggadah. The rabbis removed him from it in order to remind us he's not the main character of the story. God is the main character of the story. It's God's power, not the power of any human being, that animates all of life and all of creation. It is this little vignette of Torah is a great sermon on humility. And the duality of leadership that requires the leader to be able to live in a body that contains both arrogance and humility. Because one without the other is ineffective leadership. And one without the other isn't real leadership. It's not possible unless you have both, and it's not easy to have both. So any comments about this?
I have one other one.
Yeah, go ahead.
But we talked about, I've always felt really badly about this. Here's the guy with the 40 years, the leader for 40 years, put up with all of this, and he can't even set foot in the promised land. I mean, that's cry almost, it's horrible. But then I'm thinking he was old and Aaron was old and they had to go in and do battle. So the change of leadership, I mean, was actually somewhat of a blessing, because he led in battle before, but just by raising his arms. And now Joshua, the young guy, is leading the battle.
Yeah, but wouldn't the decent thing have been at least let him see it? I mean, right? Wouldn't it have been nice to just let him step over the line and then get him a condo in an assisted living place and let him just be, right?
That's what I think. That's why I cry with this.
Yeah.
See it.
It's hard. It's heartbreaking. And I will tell you, as a guy who hears an awful lot in his office and on his phone and on Zoom about people's lives, arrogance leads to some pretty heartbreaking situations in people's lives. It really, really does. The belief that you're special or that you won't get caught or that you have a right to do these things, these are the kinds of things that destroy people's lives. Arrogance can destroy people's lives and it can destroy nations. Mark, go ahead.
This is for Lynn off camera. She has a question, but she doesn't want to be on.
Go ahead.
Good morning, Rabbi.
Good morning.
So is there a parallel here to be made with Martin Luther King?
Is there a parallel? Oh, well, he was definitely referring to this passage. He was definitely saying, I can see it, but I may not get there with you. He was comparing himself to Moses for sure, but not because of his arrogance, but because he believed he was going to be killed. But he was absolutely referencing this reality, without a doubt.
But wasn't he personally dabbling in extramarital affairs?
I don't know, but I'll tell you this. I don't know a single person, I don't know a single human being who doesn't wrestle with arrogance and humility. This is why I said that all three of the themes we're talking about today are about duality, are about cognitive dissonance, are about how we can exist between the tension of two contradictory tendencies and impulses. The rabbis of the Talmud say every human being has an impulse for good and an impulse for evil. Now here's sort of the deepest idea here. They go on to say that the greater the impulse for evil, the greater the human being. The greater the impulse for evil, the greater the human being. Meaning, I think that we are driven by negative impulses. We're driven by ambition. We're driven by the ambition for more money or more power. But if properly controlled with humility, it's a combination that leads to greatness. And so much like you have this idea of perfection and imperfection and brokenness being whole, you have this idea of there being great power in arrogance if it's combined with humility, like those ashes in sin. And listen, I'll speak personally. I struggle with this all the time. All the time. I struggle with arrogance and humility. And I think it's being in the fight that matters. Now, I want to just go back to this transition of leadership for a moment, because I saw that, yes, Gay, you're right, balance. It is about balance. Elise said something about, isn't this sort of ageism, this idea that it was time for Moses to go? Well, I don't know. I don't know that it's so much ageism, because I think Moses would probably, just based on my character analysis, would have been the first one to hand it over to Joshua and say, here are the keys, good luck. You know, I think Moses, because if you look later at when Moses ordains Joshua, he does it in a very menschy way. And he does it in a way that's very supportive of transferring leadership from one generation to the next. I was just asked, what's the difference between arrogance? I want to see that again, because it was a really interesting. What's the difference between arrogance and confidence? I have to answer like Potter Stewart. I can't define it, but I know when I see it. I think we know the difference between an arrogant person and a confident person. You know, and I think maybe humility is the difference between arrogance and confidence, right? Maybe that's the difference, is if there's a measure of humility within it, then it's confidence. If it lacks humility, it's arrogant. That's I don't know. I wish we had where is Deborah Davidson? Where are you, Deborah? Can you unmute and talk to us for a moment? We have our resident psychologist with us. Deborah, can you talk with us a little bit from a therapeutic standpoint, this duality between arrogance and humility, ambition and humility?
Yeah, I appreciate you reaching out and your confidence in me. I'm not sure that it's the answer's there, but I'll give it a stab, because I was thinking about it. And I wonder if there is some work that's been done to develop a sound, solid base of skills that could make someone confident about what they do, whether you're a woodworker or you're a therapist, and some training and experience that you can be confident in your knowledge and your ability to perform that task. But arrogance maybe is without that training, expertise, skill, and self-reflection, I don't know. I
Interesting.
really would open it to anybody else, but thank you.
That's interesting, though. You've earned the right to be confident.
Perhaps.
I don't think you earn the right to be arrogant. I just thought of something my dad said to me one time, who always thought he was right. My dad said once, he said to me, I thought I was wrong once, but I was wrong.
And I guess I would add one more thing that is only slightly related to this point, but earlier that Voltaire comment on perfection being the enemy of good, or
Of the good.
something
That's
like
right.
that.
That's right.
And when someone is arrogant, just to tie it together, it seems also to be this insular view that's more on them rather than an outward view on other people and perhaps serving other people with a confidence in leadership.
That's good. And you know, Gay just made a comment that arrogance, the difference between confidence and arrogance may be that confidence is internal and arrogance is external.
So similar to, we're on the same line.
Yeah, very good. Very interesting. You're a smart group. Sukasa, and then we're going to move on to the third, or actually there are four, but go ahead.
People who are arrogant don't feel that they need additional training, to go back to what Deborah said.
Right.
They feel, I know everything, I can do everything. Whereas I think a person who is confident will accept advice, will look to others to agree or disagree with them.
Yeah, I want the surgeon who keeps studying. That's right. Yeah, I don't want the surgeon who thinks he or she knows it all. Yep. Or the rabbi for that matter. So let's, isn't that great? I thought I was wrong once, but I was wrong. Okay, all right, let's move on, okay? Now that's duality number 2. Now, just very quickly, I want to enlighten your eyes to how much Judaism has influenced Western civilization. So get a load of this. Those of you who have a text or a phone or watching on phone, go to chapter 21, verse 5. Let me just give you the background of chapter 21, verse 5, okay? So the background is the following. The Jews have behaved badly, okay? And they're complaining again to Moses. You know, why did you make us leave Egypt to die in the wilderness? There's no bread, there's no water. We hate the food here. Complaining. God gets fed up. And now I'm quoting the text, verse 6. The Lord sent serpents against the people, snakes everywhere, poisonous snakes. They bit the people, and many of the Israelites die. So this is God doing the old stop crying or I'll really give you something to cry about routine. And all these people are snake bitten and they die. The people came to Moses and said, we sinned by speaking out against the Lord and against you. Please intercede with the Lord and get rid of these serpents, get rid of these snakes. So here's what God tells Moses to do. Make the figure of a snake, the image of a snake, and mount it on a pole, on a standard. And if anyone who is bitten looks at it, that person will recover from the snake bite. So Moses made a copper serpent and mounted it on a standard. And when anyone was bitten by a serpent, he would look at the copper serpent and recover. And this, my friends, is where the symbol that's used by many medical societies comes from. I mean, most people think it comes from Asclepius, which is the Greek god of healing. But that actually comes from Torah. So this symbol that we all know so well comes from this week's Torah portion. But again, I see it as a symbol of duality. Here again, we see this duality because what is it that cures people? The very same thing that afflicts them. Think about that for a moment. Yeah. They're afflicted by a snake bite, they're cured by looking at this image of the snake. Now, on a biological level, we all know this is actually true. The cure for the virus is the virus itself. A vaccine is made of the virus. So the cure is made of the very thing that constitutes the affliction. And here again, now let's go a little deeper spiritually. Here again, I think we see this duality where, for example, a person's greatest strength is also his or her greatest weakness. Here we have this idea again that within evil is also the cure for evil, for good. That's going to be important as we move into the next piece, which will be our last piece. That somehow sin can lead to cleansing, that sin can lead to repentance, that a curse can lead to a blessing. And that all things have this duality within them. There is a crack in everything, including all of us. Okay, anybody want to share a word or two about that? Talia, go ahead. Unmute.
Hi, Shabbat Shalom, everyone.
Shabbat Shalom, Talia.
That whole idea of the duality of, I just think about how people maybe when they were in one stage of their life needed things to survive that don't serve them later. So they have to have that flexibility or awareness, like the awareness to see that it doesn't serve them anymore and to adapt and change. So like the arrogance seems like it's something where you're fixed and stuck. And the whole idea of having a cracked heart to let that in is like you only from experiences and shared experiences to like be able to grow. But I don't know. I think I'm all over the place. Sorry.
No, I don't. Let me tell you what you're saying. What it reminds me of is this very, the very famous chapter in Ecclesiastes that begins, there's a time for everything and a purpose for every season under heaven. And that's built on dualities, right? A time to reap, a time to sow, time to be born, a time to die, a time to weep, a time to laugh, right? A time to mourn, a time to dance. It's all about that interplay between these realities, right? And that they're both necessary. I think that's the important thing here. They're necessary. The flaws need to be embraced, controlled, addressed, but they're also a source of great strength and power and blessing. The greater the evil inclination, the greater the human being. They knew, what they were talking about. Now, I want to move forward. I'm a little sensitive to the time. We're going to jump now to another super famous section, and this is in the second of the two Torah portions called Balak, okay? And Balak was the name of a king who feared the Jews. Here we have the repetition of a very common theme of anti-Semitism in the Torah. The same thing that frightened Pharaoh in the book of Exodus is now frightening Balak. And here we go. So Balak, I'm on chapter 22 now, for those of you who are following along, okay? Numbers 22. So Balak is a Moabite king, and the Israelites are living in Moab. And guess what? Like every place we go, we figure it out and we prosper. So Balak is alarmed, I'm going to go to the text now, because that people, meaning the Jews, were so numerous, and he dreaded the Israelites. And Moab said to the elders of Midian, "This horde will lick clean all that is about us, like an ox licks up the grass of the field." Balak, who was the king of Moab at the time, sent messengers to Balaam, who's this prophet. And he says to him, "These people that came out of Egypt, they hide the earth from view. I mean, there's so many of them, you can't even see the ground. They've settled next to me. I want you to go curse these people." Remember, this was written at a time when people believed very concretely in the power of blessings and curses. So to make a long story short, there's a lot of back and forth here where Balaam is told by God 3 different times, no, no, no. You can't go curse the Israelites because they're a blessed people. No, no, no. And finally, God allows it. And Balaam goes to curse he's on this journey to curse the Israelites. And then we have the scene of the talking ass, right? Or donkey, obviously. And there's an angel of God in front of Balaam's donkey, a fiery angel holding a sword. Balaam can't see it, but the donkey can. And there's some irony in an ass having better vision than a prophet, a pagan prophet. I think that was probably not lost on the biblical reader at the time. This is just making fun, obviously, of Moabite prophets and Midianite prophecy, that, you know, a donkey can see what they cannot. And finally, when he arrives at a spot where he can see the Israelites and he tries to curse them, what are the words that come out of his mouth? Ma tovu ohalecha Yaakov mishkenotecha Yisrael. Ma tovu ohalecha Yaakov. Right? That song, right? That famous song that we sing every Shabbat morning. How beautiful are your dwelling places, O Israel, right? So he opens his mouth to curse and a blessing comes out. Now, help me with the sermon. Anybody have an idea about the subtext here, besides making fun of anti-Semites and their prophets? Anybody have a thought? If you were going to write a column about this in about 20 minutes when we're done here, what would it be? You're all part of my master plan. Nancy, unmute and go ahead. No? Okay. All right. Yeah. Risa, go ahead.
There's a lot about words going on here. You speak, and sometimes you don't know what the result is going to be of what you say. And it goes back also to the previous section where Moses calls the people rebels, and that is also he
denigrates them. Yes.
He denigrates them.
Yes.
And that is also part of his sin. And the same guy can talk to God and convince God not to punish the people. So, and that happens all through these texts.
Yes, there's this tension or duality or back and forth or dissonance. Yes.
Right, of what you speak and what it can do.
Yes.
It can get you in trouble or it can be wonderful. And, you know, when you talked about your question, you know, we say that no rabbi can stand on the pulpit unless he has a very strong ego. So that goes back to the humility and confidence. And it's true, but if you have respect for the people with whom you're speaking, you won't be arrogant.
Yeah, I would say this. I agree with you. No rabbi can stand on the pulpit without ego, but no rabbi can remain on the pulpit without humility.
Exactly correct.
Right?
Absolutely.
That's what it is.
But it ties it all together.
Yes, it does. And I think look, first of all, there are a number of simple ideas here that I think historically are worth mentioning. First of all, we have this classic anti-Semitic trope that the Jews are taking over our society. They can't be trusted. There are too many of them. You know, so that's the first thing. The second thing is, you know, this subtext of never bet against the Jews, right? This is God saying when Balaam asks the God of the Israelites, can I go curse these people? God says, no, they're blessed. Why would you go curse them? It's a waste of your time and effort. They can't be cursed, right? They're a blessed people. And he references the promise that God made to, God references the promise that God made to Abraham to make your descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky or the sands of the sea. So that's the second sort of historical trope here, which is never bet against the Jews. Okay. Now, yeah, Deborah's mentioning in the chat this duality of we should all, you all I think know this. I gave a sermon about this on the high holidays. Actually, I gave a 2-part sermon. It was several years ago. On Rosh Hashanah, I talked about exceptionalism and the importance of greatness, and that human beings are constructed for greatness. And then on Kol Nidre, I talked about the importance of humility. And I talked about this little piece of Talmud that says every human being should walk around with a piece of paper in one pocket that says, the world was created for me, right? The world was created for me. It's my world. And in the other pocket, a piece of paper that has written on it, I am but dust and ash. I am nothing. And if you can walk through life remembering what's in each pocket, that's a successful life, right? Now, let's get back to what I think is a very powerful theme, and I think it has a lot to do with COVID-19, and I think it has a lot to do with the civil unrest and the new assessment and understanding, I hope, of the depth of racism in our culture and xenophobia. What really happens here on a very simple level is that a curse becomes a blessing. A curse turns into a blessing. And I'd like us all to ask ourselves a question. If you think about the greatest or one of the greatest blessings in your life, just think about it, whatever it is, okay? Just think for a moment to yourself about the greatest blessing in your life, and then trace that blessing back to its origin. How did that happen? Why did that happen? When did that happen? And most times you will discover that it was a blessing born out of adversity. So I call this the root of all blessings, and the double entendre is intentional. It's both R-O-O-T and R-O-U-T-E. The root of all blessings originates in some form of curse or pain or dysfunction or adversity. And this might well be what the rabbis had in mind when they said, the greater the evil inclination, the greater the human being. And here we have the turning, the literal turning of a curse into a blessing, which I think is not only the best, but the only option available to us right now in the circumstances in which we find ourselves. That is our only choice. We have to find a way to turn these curses into blessings. And by the way, that doesn't include pretending it's not a curse, because it is. But we've seen time and time again, like the snake that cured, within the curse is also the blessing. Within the disease is also the cure. So, ladies and gentlemen, that's about as profound as I am capable of being.
Humility.
It's also very.
With the help of the Torah. Someone is commenting. Please
Yeah.
go ahead.
It also goes back to what you often say. It's not how you fall, it's how you get up.
Yeah. And can you and there is no getting up without falling. I mean, there are lots of ways of saying this. But I think what we're seeing here in these Torah portions is this notion that baked into the very essence of existence itself is this duality, that it is the destiny of human beings to live in and manage and harness in order to grow. Merle.
I think you have to have the willingness to accept whatever the curse is in order to heal.
Well, sometimes you don't have a choice. The curse brings you to your knees. The curse brings you to your knees, right?
True.
Now, I'll just end with something that I think is quite beautiful too, from the Chabad rabbis on this. The common understanding of this snake idea was that people were healed because they looked at the snake, this copper snake. But the Chabad commentary says, no, that's not what it was. It was because the people looked up. Remember, it was up on a high standard on a pole, that they were healed because they looked upward. It didn't have anything to do with the snake, to which I would say, well, then why didn't God just say, tell the people to look heavenward? So I don't really buy it, but it's kind of a cool idea anyway, spiritually cool idea, because we are commanded when we're praying to keep our head down, our eyes down on the Siddur. So anyway, I just thought I'd share that with you. All right, now, as promised, we have to take a vote here, okay? And I'm not sure, Don Levy, are you with me? Don, are you there?
I am, but muted.
Okay, so Don, how can we take a vote on Zoom to see? I'm going to give you.
Oh, we have polling here.
We do. Can you set it up?
Yes.
Okay, so here are my choices. I'm going to write the article. The group votes for me to write. Okay, that's going to be my afternoon, and then you'll see it at 5 or 6 o'clock.
Okay, give me answer 1 or choice 1.
All right. Answer 1 is that perfection, the problem with perfection. Okay, we'll just call it that. David, you're a writer. Can't go wrong with a little alliteration, right? The problem of perfection. I'll probably give it a different title, but no one's perfect. Maybe that'll be it. Okay, no one's
We'll
perfect.
know when we get it.
Say all three and then let us vote.
Yeah, we're going to list all 3. Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Number 2 will be the dangers of arrogance. I won't call it that, but okay. The dangers of arrogance. And number 3 will be turning curses into blessings. Because I think I can deliver any of those 3 in the next 3 hours or so. So,
I think you can turn them all into one.
Yes.
No, please don't do that to me. That's terrible.
Focus.
Maybe with more time. I'm too humble to say I can do that.
Okay.
Okay.
So
all right. And then I'm going to end with it. Okay. Can you post it now, Don?
It is posted.
All right. Everybody, how do they vote?
Arrogance.
Yep.
Okay.
You start
Click
voting.
on the thing.
Arrogance. Are you with me?
Yeah, right.
Click in the box.
This is great.
It comes up as a box. It's great.
Just
You click on the little box and it says submit.
Submit.
Yeah.
The one you want.
This is
Very-
great.
The one you want.
Very technologically advanced.
We're
This
voting.
is the best thing ever.
Oh, just wait.
All right. Biden's winning.
When it went over.
I was going to say arrogance without humility would be Trump. Sorry.
Shh, quiet.
Ick.
Quiet. This is a politics-free zone.
Sorry.
All right. It looks to me. Okay. I think we've got 50 of 58, 86% of the vote. We now have 91% of the vote. Okay, 91% of the vote is in, so I think the network can call the election.
Okay.
Coming in at 19%, the problem with perfection. Coming in at 28%, the dangers of arrogance. The winner and still champion at 55%, turning curses into blessings. So Valerie said it's rigged. It's fake news, guys.
Well, you all saw it in real time here.
It's corrupt. The system is corrupt. Okay.
Let's vote again.
Dangling chads.
Yeah, a hanging Chad. Yes. Poor Chad. Okay, now some of you some of you already know this joke. Okay, so forgive me if you know it already, but if you don't, it's one of my two favorite jokes about arrogance. So I'm going to end our session with one of my two favorite jokes about arrogance. The other one might be slightly too off color to do in this context. So maybe we should do another vote and see who wants the off color joke and who wants the clean joke. But I know what the results would be. So I'm going with the clean joke. So I stay on the pulpit, right, Risa?
Yeah.
Okay. So many of you know that on Yom Kippur, there's a special Aleinu where as a sign of humility, you actually lie belly down on the floor, flat on the floor of the bima or the shul. It's called falling korim. And you really just prostrate yourself completely flat, belly down, face down, as a sign of humility. So it comes to that point in the service, and the rabbi starts just weeping and moaning and preaching as he goes belly down, saying, Lord, before you, I am nothing. I am nothing, Lord, before you. I am dust and ash. I am dust beneath the feet of your existence. I am nothing. I am nothing. And the cantor is so moved that he throws himself down on the bima and starts loudly proclaiming the same thing. Lord, before you, I am dust beneath your feet. I am nothing. I am nothing. And then the rabbi and the cantor here in the very back of the shul, Mr. Cohen, is so moved, he throws himself into the aisle, belly down on the floor, and starts screaming out, Lord, before you, I am nothing. I am nothing. And the cantor turns to the rabbi and says, huh, look who thinks he's nothing. That is a very, very sophisticated joke about the duality of humility and arrogance, right?
Let's have the dirty one now.
When you start touting your humility, you're just arrogant. Oh, you want to hear the unclean one a little bit? Should I do that?
Go ahead.
All right. Okay. You're my friends. Okay. So there's this 85. I can't believe I'm. Okay. All right. You're Don. Don't record this. Okay. All right. So there's this 85-year-old guy.
Stand by. Say goodbye to Facebook.
Okay. Goodbye, Facebook. Yeah. Okay. There's this 85-year-old guy,